This is the plaintiff, Tammy Williams. She says the defendant, her roommate and friend, owes her money for rent because he skipped out on her and moved back home. She can't afford the place on her own. The defendant has put her into a bad financial situation because he's as irresponsible as they come, and she's suing him for the $3,815 she's owed. This is the defendant, Dakota Crawford-Hahn. He says the plaintiff had a list of rules she wanted him to follow, like no random hookups in the apartment. She's a hypocrite, though, because she met a guy online and he moved in with them. The plaintiff made it uncomfortable living there. He moved out, and he owes her nothing. He's accused of taking off. The defendant has filed a countersuit for $700 for paid rent and security.
All parties, please raise your right hands.
Welcome back to the People's Court. Next case on the docket. The plaintiff says her former friend and roommate owes her money because he skipped out on her without paying the rent. But the defendant says the plaintiff was a dictator with all these draconian rules, and no one could live with her. It's the case of, don't tell me what to do.
Thank you, Douglas.
You're welcome.
Okay, Ms. Williams, how did you and Mr. Crawford-Hahn know each other?
We worked together at a previous job, and he was a team lead, and I was a payment verification specialist.
Okay, and then you decided to move in together to be roommates?
Yes, I was moving to Texas anyway before Mr. Crawford-Hahn decided he wanted to move to Texas, first time out of the state of Wisconsin. So he was like, okay, yeah, we could do this half and half on everything. That's correct.
Okay. And so what happens? You rent an apartment, and what happens?
I rent an apartment. I get everything. We go half and half. There was no deposit. It was a prorated amount because we moved in on June 15th. We were doing fine, going along, paying rent. We were splitting everything in half. The electric, rent, everything was in half. And then he had some issues with his vehicle. He moved out. I did meet a guy online, but he came, his truck broke down on the way. He didn't have a way to get back to Mississippi. He stayed here for 3 weeks and left. And then Mr. Crawford decided he wanted to move out, saying that he was going to go back home to Wisconsin because of his grandfather passing, grandmother being ill, things of that nature. And his car got repoed, and he had to stay at a friend's house up the street to take an Uber to work it. He couldn't stay here, so he decided to leave the day before rent was due.
Okay, let's back up a second. You meet a guy online, and the guy comes to visit and stays 3 weeks. What 3 weeks was that? It was what month?
November the 5th, he came because his truck broke down on the way here. So November the 5th. And then 3 weeks after, he got a job.
So was he still living there? Was the defendant still living there with you when the guy comes and stays for 3 weeks?
Yes, ma'am. He was here, and he was going to work and things of that nature. He was here.
Okay. Now, according to you, Mr. Crawford-Hahn, you decided to move out. Why?
She was correct that it was about, like, my car did get repoed and a few other things happened. But it was mostly, I was staying there because of that type of living situation that she presented. Because I didn't want to be the jerk that said, no, you can't have your boyfriend live with us, when she had all these rules for, like, you can't have hookups, no boyfriends or girlfriends allowed, things like that. And it just kind of put me into a position where I didn't want to be the mean guy that says, no, you can't have the guy that broke down to Mississippi to come and live there. So that also put me in an awkward position because I just didn't want to be the guy that was like...
Right, but what reason did you actually give for no longer... Because you didn't stay there in November, but you paid November rent. You didn't stay there in December, but you paid December rent. You didn't stay there in January, but you paid January rent. Where were you staying those months?
I was staying with a friend because she didn't give me any type of reason that her boyfriend left or anything like that. So it was mainly as well as her boyfriend living there.
Did you ever go back there and see that he was no longer there? Or you never?
No.
Ms. Williams, I need you to stop with the bobbleheading. I'm talking to him now. I just need to. All right, can you just explain to me, if you never went back there, there is none so blind as he who will not see. In other words, if you want to get out of paying rent because the situation was unlivable because she had some strange guy in your face, that's great. But you got to prove to me that that's why you decided to stop living there. I've actually got a situation that's a little bit different because I've got you living somewhere else but paying rent there for months. Why were you living in that other place? Because it was closer to work?
It was that, but again, it was back to that other situation. So I just
Well, you got to prove that. And did you ever send her a
communication.
text or an email or a note or anything? Did you ever have a conversation with her where you told her this guy's got to go, anything like that?
No.
All right. So now February. So why did you keep paying rent in November, December, and January? What was your plan?
My plan was to figure out how to get back to Wisconsin. And I just figured it was easier if I just paid at both of the places to help with the anxiety that I got from the whole situation, and then just planning on quitting my job, and then with my car being repoed, I just had to try to collect all the eggs at once to figure out what the heck I was going to do.
Okay. All right. So when did your car get repossessed?
That was on January 1st, because that's when I got back from visiting my family in Wisconsin.
Okay. And now Wisconsin all of a sudden didn't look so bad, right?
Right.
You're home for the holidays. Everybody loves you. There, you've got rides. So then you decide you're going to go back to Wisconsin. You tell her on the 31st of January that you're going to go back. Why did you tell her so late in the game? You really hadn't made the decision yet, or you weren't ready to leave yet, or?
It was basically of the decision of just everything, and I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna head on out.
Are you still there, Ms.
Yes,
Williams?
ma'am, I am.
Yes.
And what efforts have you made to get a roommate? Because it's a 2-bedroom, right?
Yes, it is. And
Okay.
I asked
So-
like other people that I work with and things of that nature, but no one's wanting to move in. This is not the best apartment in the world. We found it online. So that's why I wanted to move out early, even with Mr. Carpenhan here. We had already discussed moving out because my uncle's ill. I was going to move in with my uncle. He was going to get his own apartment. That was all discussed ahead of time. I also offered Mr. Carpenhan, let me know in advance. Just let me know in advance if you're going to move out. Even I offered
And
him
what
to
would you
pay
have done? So let's say in a perfect world he had let you know and he had told you, listen, I'm homesick, I want to go home. What would you have done then? Same thing you're doing now, or would you have done something differently?
I would have had to have broken my lease and moved back with my uncle and them earlier than needed and try and pay out the lease. But I'm trying not to
But
have
you haven't
that
done that
DC.
now. Right, but you haven't done that now. You haven't moved out. So do you intend to move out? Because I don't think you do. I think you're going to live it out. I'm trying to figure out what
No,
you're
ma'am.
doing.
Oh, in August, yes, I plan to move out. That is correct. Yes, ma'am. That was already discussed, and I don't want to live in this apartment anymore. But also don't want to be sued. My uncle told me if I can help it, don't break the lease because of all that's going to follow you, your bad credit, and then trying to get a house or anything else is going to be on your credit for 7 years. And that's why I've been struggling and fighting it out, trying to stay here
Right.
and make sure I complete
But also,
lease.
the best thing that you can do, and it may not be very comfortable, but the best thing that you can do is try a little harder to get a roommate to help pay. Because I don't buy what the defendant is saying, that the reason he had to move out is because all of a sudden you brought in a new person, and that's why I moved out. That's not why I moved out. He moved out because he was having car trouble. He was closer to his job. He was with friends. He was happier there. He kept paying you rent. Which shows me that it wasn't uninhabitable for him having that stranger there. I believe you when you say it ended up being temporary. He didn't even know because he doesn't go back. He pays you rent in November, he pays you rent December, he pays you rent in January. So the question becomes then, what happens from February to August? And we have this concept in the law called mitigating your damages. That means you try not to bleed to death, okay? You put a tourniquet and you try to stop that. So your uncle's right. You don't want bad credit following you, but you could do a little something to help yourself and try harder to get a roommate. So I understand asking for, say, February, maybe even March, because maybe it takes you 30 days or 60 days to find an acceptable roommate. You don't just want to find anybody and put anybody in there. I get that. But why would it take you 6 months? Like, it wouldn't, I understand that he made an agreement to rent until the end of August, but you also have an obligation to stop the bleeding and try to get another roommate. So what I'm going to do is I am going to order the defendant. How much was the rent? $450 each?
Yes, the 909 is the base rent without the utilities. That's correct. And I did get a second job, Your Honor, to try to stop the bleeding because I haven't found
God
a
bless
roommate.
you.
So I had to. Yes, ma'am.
Have you tried putting a notice in the paper? You just don't want to go that way, like on Zillow or on Craigslist, or you just don't want to? I understand. I mean, that's fine. And those are choices we make in life, and I get it. The thing is, I can only award you what you're legally supposed to be getting. And I'm going to find that under these circumstances, you should have at least 60 days to find somebody new. I'm going to order him to pay you $450 for February plus $450 for March, plus the $90 in late fees that I know you had to pay on each of those, for a sum total judgment in the amount of $1,080. And you got to be kidding. You have a counterclaim against her? When you left her high and dry like that? I don't think so. 0 on the counterclaim. Good luck, folks.
Thank you.
So the plaintiff is going to get just over $1,000 back from the defendant. We'll see how she feels about that in a moment. Mr. Crawford Khan, you owe her that money. What do you feel about it now?
Yeah, after the hindsight, I do agree with the ruling, but again, it's just the whole situation was just kind of messed. So we had rules and she didn't want to follow them, so it is what it is.
All right. I hope you like it going back home to Wisconsin. All righty. Good luck to you. Ms. Williams, how do you feel? You were suing for almost $4,000. You're just getting over $1,000. How do you feel about that?
That's perfectly fine. I mean, I offered him to pay $350, and that'd be the end of it. But he ignored me, and he wouldn't reply to my text message. So $1,000 better than the $350 I offered him.
Yeah, all right. And the judge gave you some good advice on how you should handle things right now. How do you feel about that? Do you think you're going to be able to do that? Maybe find another roommate?
No, I'm not looking. Never, ever any more roommates.
No more. All right. Well, good luck to you. I hope it works out for you.
Doug, the judge talked about mitigating damages. That means mitigating is another word for minimizing your damages. That means you just can't sit on your hands and let the damages accumulate. In a situation like this, if somebody skips out and they shouldn't have, you still have a duty to try and find another roommate and minimize your damages, because once that new roommate starts paying rent, the damages stop. And you have a duty to do that, and if you don't do it, you could end up losing the case.
The question is, John, do you follow Marilyn's advice?
Oh, we might have differing opinions on this. The answer is, it depends on what the advice is about. When it comes to emotional intelligence, you've got it, and I absolutely don't. In fact, you have it in spades. So if it's anything that has to do with friends or family that has an emotional component, I go to you. You're my lodestar 100%, because I'm lost without that kind of advice, the psychological stuff. But if it's, how do you tie a clove hitch, or how do you tie a sheet bend, a knot or something?
All those useful things. All those useful things, right? The things that...
Exactly. So, we kind of, and I do have some of that. I can tie a lot of knots, and I know how to do that stuff. So it's like we try to stay in our own lanes, right?
Right.